Welcome to Preventing Brand Slaughter, your go-to show for discovering authentic, leading-edge ways to drive employee retention, elevate customer experience, and dominate marketing and sales targets without unknowingly killing your own brand. Tune in to lighthearted, transparent conversations featuring today's leading industry experts and entrepreneurs, breaking down stories of screw-ups, successes, and nuggets of wisdom every business owner or leader should know at heart. Let's get this show started with your hosts, Eric Sims and John Giuliano.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Preventing Brand Slaughter, the podcast dedicated to helping companies large and small stop the number one silent killer of businesses today, brand slaughter. So what's brand slaughter? It's the act of knowingly or unknowingly killing your own brand via poor talent, techniques, or technology. So we invite guests on the show to share what they're doing to assist their own companies or organizations they work with around the world to help prevent brand slaughter. Today, we're really fortunate to have Dr. Kent Wessinger with us as our guest. Now, Dr. Kent is the principal partner at Retention Partners. So he is what they call a people scientist today, focused on sustainable growth solutions and organizations navigating a workforce crisis. Now, Dr. K is hyper-focused on helping companies with what he calls the 3 wins of attraction, engagement, and retention of millennial employees and clients. So as a cross-generational growth strategist, Dr. Wessinger's research emphatically reveals that many perspectives and processes held by millennials are not aligned with the traditional growth strategies of today, and that non-millennial leaders are creating a deeper divide between the generations, which is threatening sustainable growth and revenue. So AKA, they're creating their own brand slaughter. So help me welcome to the show, Dr. Kent Wessinger. Dr. K, welcome to the show, Dr. Kent Wessinger. Dr. K, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
I just got done kind of covering your bio, but I always like to go back in and because of the concept of this show where we're talking about primarily 3 things, which is talent, techniques, and technologies, and how companies and individuals in leveraging those things can damage their own brand unknowingly, right? Just not paying attention, and sometimes knowingly at the same time. And the goal of this show is just helping people prevent brand slaughter within their own company and organizations that they work with. So you being, that you focus a lot on the talent aspect of the business and more than that, but that's a big piece of it. Let's just start out by having you share a little bit about who you are and how you came up with in the background on like Retention Partners. I think it's really interesting where it came from, because although it's fairly new, your research is not new. You've been working at this for a long time.
Yeah. About a decade ago, I began to see a workforce crisis beginning to just stir, and it concerned me. And so as I began to dig in what was quickly becoming the largest block of the workforce, which was millennial, I really could not find what I defined was credible research or credible data or even healthy, good implementation experiences that were solving this. As I begin to see this, lack of a better way to say it, because people want to call it this today, a tsunami beginning to formulate way out into the sea. And so knowing that I couldn't find any good, valid research that I thought or I defined that brought truth or light into this, I developed a research project hoping to get just 500 participants. And I focused on one thing. I focused on the relationship between millennials and organization structures. And so here we stand 8.5 years after it's launched. It's open-ended because I'm tracking leadership decisions, socioeconomic decisions, obviously employment decisions, career decisions, all those kind of things with this generation as they mature. It has almost 45,000 participants from 27 nations today. It's been implemented in organizations, profit and nonprofit, over 100,000 employees down to 10 employees. And so one of the things that I bring to the table is not just research and data, but I bring that implementation experience where that research and data has been tested. And so one of the things that I like to say to leaders is they say, what do you bring us? And I say 2 things, clarity and clarity. Because when it comes to the workforce, what I've been working with high yielding leaders, because I mainly work with C-suites. And so when it comes to working with those people, I've realized that they've got a very clear vision of what they determine is success. and their pathway and their track of success. But I've also learned that they don't have a very clear vision on how to solve their workforce crisis, which ultimately has become an impediment to their success and their sustainable growth. And so what I do is I bring them this clarity of being able to identify where that pathway is to solve that workforce crisis. Look, I have so many leaders tell me, I know that our growth is not only, it's realistic, our growth goals are realistic, our growth goals are attainable, our growth goals are the best that we've ever had. The problem is we've got this impediment in our pathway that we don't know how to solve, and it's threatening our growth. And so the conclusion I've come to from working with so many of those leaders is they don't have a vision. They don't know the pathway to overcome that impediment to reach their growth goals. And as a result, what my research tells us is, think about this. In January of 2020, the month before the pandemic, 48%, half of leaders said they were concerned about the future of their company with a millennial workforce. That has jumped up to 69%. Almost 7 out of 10 leaders today say they're concerned about their growth. They're also concerned about what their company is going to look like 10 years from now with a millennial workforce. Well, the reason they're concerned is because they don't know how to solve, or they don't have the information. They don't see the pathway. They don't have a vision to be able to overcome this impediment of this workforce crisis. And just one more piece of that. Because there is a lack of vision there, and because there's a lack of understanding there, what has happened is that many leaders have sought information, wisdom, data, and they're looking for just some kind of solution because that concern is so real and that threat is real. But what I've also discovered is that many leaders are they're looking at they're using one-line quips off of social media or LinkedIn or from leaders that they believe they respect. And they're taking these little one-line quips from, social media darlings, or, whether it be some kind of post or something. They're saying, hey, that resonates, let's use that. And they're coming up short. And the reason they're coming up short is because it's not rooted in a good, healthy data set. And it's not rooted in, it's not been tested by any kind of implementation. And so what I say when I bring clarity is I bring clarity to the crisis, the workforce crisis, but I bring also clarity to show people where that pathway is and how to overcome those impediments on that pathway to reach and achieve their growth goals. So
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I know that in the companies that John and I work with as our clients. So, our company, we deal a lot with talent, techniques, and technologies as well. And so supplying one or all of those in conjunction with what they may already have. It is a major issue with people when it comes to hiring and retaining the staff necessary. So you use the word crisis. It's absolutely that at this point in time when companies are losing clients, forcing themselves to change directions unnecessarily, right? Losing business. I mean, we've seen all the catastrophe you can see from this. And again, we touch multiple industries. So we're not just focused on one. This crisis is agnostic. It doesn't really care what industry or business you're in. I mean, as an example, I was joking with John. I went yesterday to get my oil changed. I had to last minute switch because I'm leaving town. So I couldn't go to the dealership because they were booked up. So I had to just try to find an oil change place, which one was a nightmare to begin with. Then I get there and I'm like, they're super busy, but I can't figure out why. And I asked the guy, he goes, well, we're not busy because we have too much business. We have adequate business. We're busy because we can't find enough people to come work for us and stay here. He goes, so I have 7 bays, but I have 3 guys. And so I'm like, this is just everywhere. Like it's whatever it is, retail shops, call centers, financial industry, or whatever it is. So it's incredible. What do you see as, I know that you say like the leaders are looking at it and they're picking and choosing, but is it a mindset issue first, or is it, from the leadership standpoint, are they struggling to alter their perspective? Because every generation, it seems like, looks at the next upcoming generation and says, instead of looking at them and saying that could be the greatest generation that's ever walked the face of the earth, they look at them and pick out all the reasons they think they're not. And so I know that bleeds into business. Do you see a lot of that type of mindset going on with them, or is it a complete, lack of understanding? What is it?
I see that every day, Eric. Literally, I see it every day. I hear it from every single leader. Hold on one second. I see it every day. I see it from every single leader. And let me just give you a data point that goes beyond just what my words can say. In the research project, which contrasts the perspectives of non-millennial leaders, so baby boomers and Gen X leaders, it contrasts their perspectives to millennials and Gen Zs. The very first question says, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think of a millennial or a millennial employee? So from 500 participants to almost 45,000 participants, those first three terms have remained static. They have not changed on either side of the equation. So what I know is this, that those perspectives are fairly rigid. Now, okay. So what does a baby boomer leader think of a millennial employee? The top three terms: entitled, lazy, selfish.
Wow.
Those are the top three words. Okay, so then what does a millennial think about their own generation when it comes to their workforce? Creative, innovative, and smart. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we see generational conflict right out of the gate in the research project. And to your point, it's a conflict or a conflict of perspective. Now, I have a lot of leaders that would argue with me that that's not just a perspective, that's observation. They're using that entitled, lazy, selfish based on observation, not just a perspective. And so, but my point back to them is, are you going to achieve your growth goals with entitled, lazy, selfish workforce? The answer is unequivocally no, not a chance, not going to happen. But can you achieve your growth goals with a workforce that's creative, innovative, and smart? And then the answer is polar opposite, absolutely. So then how is it that we tap into that innovative, creative, smart workforce? And not only is that one of the things that I bring to the table as far as a pathway, but I also help leaders understand how we make those modifications. And coming full circle to answer your question, one of the most difficult things that seasoned leaders struggle with the most right out of the gate with me is that they believe, or there's this assumption that they're going to have to completely reconstitute the structure of their company in order to have that workforce that's successful, that keeps that workforce in the building, to attract that workforce, to keep that workforce engaged. And the truth of the fact is that's a lie. There's just a few slight modifications that leaders need to make to successfully make that shift from recruiting hamster wheel to attracting top talent. Mm-hmm. There's just a few. There's only one modification that I continue to say to leaders that will position your employees for a high level of engagement inside the company. And then there's only one position, also one step that I would argue that it takes to keep them in the building, to keep retention where it needs to be. And so those modifications are not great modifications, not massive, monumental modifications, but they do require some intentionality. And that intention, in order to get to that place, to intentionally make those modifications, leaders have to have a clear understanding on why we're making those modifications. If they can't go there, they're going to struggle to survive. Now, let me add one more point to that. And it's to what I see that you're doing, and I greatly appreciate it. There are a lot of leaders that have come to the place, they're convinced that if they reach into the past and try to bring what their success, all the success and the structures and the models of the past into the present to prepare for an outcome in the future. I've seen that happen over and over again. And I would argue this: those leaders that are not making those modifications to achieve their growth goals by solving that impediment of the workforce, they're doing one thing. They are slaughtering their brand. It's self-inflicted slaughter, because this workforce is not only the largest workforce that we have, or we've actually ever even known, But this workforce also is quickly assimilating into a leadership position, not just from a consumer side, but also from an organizational side.
Yeah.
If we don't make these modifications, we are intentionally self-inflicting, slaughtering our brand. And again, I want to say, I'm not talking about massive modifications to structures, but I'm talking about intentional modifications to structures that will help us not only preserve our brand, but also will position us on that pathway to achieve our sustainable growth goals.
Yeah, that's great feedback and commentary. Now, diving a little bit deeper, can you tell us what are millennials looking for from an employer experience and from a working experience? Is it different from what Gen X is looking for, and keep going back, or is it pretty much the same thing with just a different approach?
It is different. And again, I don't want to be that guy. Great question, by the way. But I don't want to be that guy that propagates that this generation deserves more special attention than any other generation. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy.
I don't think. Just to interrupt you, I don't think that's what you're saying. Like, I know if anybody's hearing that, I'll dispute that because I've talked to you before. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that every generation is a little bit different, right? Everybody will agree to that. I think the first thing that we need to accept is that different doesn't mean wrong. Different means different, right? In the leadership standpoint, we can either be like, I remember growing up and hearing my grandfather talk about my dad's generation, which is a baby boomer. You know what he said about baby boomers? Lazy, entitled, same thing. Same thing.
Yeah.
And every generation says the same thing because they think the next generation is not as smart as them, or maybe it doesn't work as hard as it's the same cycle of BS that each generation looks back. And I think it goes to a very important point that you've probably discovered, which is companies get married to what made them successful, right? It's great to acknowledge what made you successful. Being married to it may not be the right way to approach it, because when you're married to it, you're locked to it. If you understand that what got you to the dance today may not be what gets you to the dance tomorrow, right? You stay open to that. It's going to allow you the openness to say, like, let's look at things differently and fresh each time. So anyway, I meant to interrupt you, but I meant to just agree with you that I don't think that's where your stance is. It's a very healthy. Let's be healthy about how we look at generational differences and be open to the fact that just because someone's different doesn't mean it's wrong. And just because it's different, to your point, doesn't mean we have to make massive, complete structural organizational changes. We can make minor, calculated, intelligent shifts that will help us in our business. So anyway, go ahead. I just
absolutely. I don't get the opportunity to say this a lot, so I'm gonna unpack this right here. Based on what both of you said, if I had to target in on ground zero of the workforce crisis, ground zero of this generational transition, especially with this millennials into the workforce, ground zero is an area that I think most leaders are super surprised about. It's twofold. The first is process. What this generation is saying is that we admire your processes. We know that your processes have positioned the company or the organization where it is today. But what's happened is a lot of seasoned leaders, they've kind of taken up that whole theory of rigidity. The older we get, the more rigid we get because of, the pathways that we've taken. So they get rigid in their processes and not really realize that their processes have become or been defined by themselves as absolute. We cannot redefine our processes. Our processes are what guide us here. Yep. Now here comes this new generation. That they're not challenging brand, they're not challenging product, they're challenging process. Mm-hmm. And so some leaders go, oh, here we go. That entitled little, twit, he's come into our company. We've been here 30, 35 years, and now they've been in here 2 years or 1 year, and they're challenging our process. What do you mean by that? Well, first of all, that employee was very intentional about going to work in your company. In that company. And what I mean by intentional is they believed in your mission, what you are trying to achieve. They so believe in your mission that they're willing to challenge the processes of which you're currently engaged. But they're willing to challenge them or want to challenge them from a perspective of not to just challenge, not to be the smartest person in the room. They're challenging your processes because they realize they can be better. They can be more productive. They can earn more revenue. They're challenging them because maybe your processes are not effective to their own generation, which is quickly becoming the wealthiest generation alive as well.
Yeah.
And so the challenge to that process becomes offensive for some leaders. And so this is the analogy that I use to them a lot, is that think about a bowling alley. I'm not a bowler. I've probably only been bowling less than 20 times in my whole life. But when you think about what bowling is, it's always been the same. I mean, we go in, we rent our shoes, we go, we pick out our ball, we grab the ball, we put our 2 fingers and thumb in the ball, we walk up to the line, we roll the ball, and the objective is to keep it out of the gutter and knock the pins down. That's the way it's been.
Yep.
Now, here comes a younger generation that walks in barefooted, walks over, grabs the ball, walks down halfway down the alley of the parallel and chunks the ball at the pins and knocks the pins down. What do older leaders do? We get all pissed off. You can't do that. First of all, you got to have the shoes. You went over the line. Oh, third of all, you can't throw the freaking ball. You can't do that. What they miss, though, is the outcome. And the outcome is exactly the same outcome as what the seasoned leaders are desiring and what they're shooting at. So the process, when it becomes absolute, it actually becomes a very strong impediment, even threat to the growth of the company.
Yeah.
The second piece goes, so there's process. And then the second piece is this, accountability. Now, any leader that hears my voice right now, I want to tell you, you can go to the wisest man on the mountain to solve your workforce crisis. You can use the greatest one-line quip that you've ever heard. You can go to the best seminar that you've ever heard. But I'm telling you right now, after nearly 45,000 participants in this research project and in hundreds of implementation experiences, I'm telling you there's one gate, there is only one door that you have to walk through to solve your workforce crisis. And it's a door that's shocking to most leaders, and it's the door of accountability. I see growing more intense every single day. Leaders, even seasoned leaders, are growing more and more timid in holding their younger workforce accountable for productivity. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're growing more timid is because they recognize what it costs if that employee, if that talent, if that team leaves the building. They recognize what it costs to replace them. Leaders are starting to recognize what it costs them in that slack of productivity until the next employer or the next team is able to get back to that place of productivity. The expense is massive. Matter of fact, my research shows that it costs us an average of $34,000 to replace one millennial employee today, and that doesn't even factor in productivity. And so that accountability, so what's happening is leaders are getting more timid about keeping employees accountable because they're afraid to leave the building. Two things. Younger workforce wants to be held accountable for productivity. They want to be held. They're asking you, they're begging you to hold them accountable for productivity. That's the first thing. But the most important thing in this accountability piece is that your model of accountability must be modified. It's the first modification. Again, You can't solve your workforce crisis without a modification of accountability. For ages, accountability has been hierarchical, top to the bottom. The top holds the next layer accountable. The next layer holds the next layer accountable, all the way to the bottom. I can tell you that model of accountability, it's done. It's dead. Bury it. Have a funeral for it. Accountability today is now reciprocal. And I call it from, through, to. So what happens is we hold our younger workforce accountable for productivity. But now our younger workforce is holding the company back accountable for structures of success. They want to be successful in the building. but do we provide those structures of success? And so the average millennial in January 2020 stayed on the job 16 months compared to the average baby boomer of 19.1 years. Today, my research shows that the average millennial is only staying on the job 11 months. That's pretty stunning. The second piece of that is when we begin to ask why 11 months and begin to dig into 11 months, this is what else we discover. We discover that those millennials that left at 11 months had already filled out a CV, an application, a resume to move on at 6 months. And so then the question becomes, why would you do that? And it's very clear, according to the research and implementation experience, when they come into your company, when they buy into your mission, when they see what you're offering, if you do not have those structures of success that they believe will facilitate your structures of success, they're not staying because they ultimately, every millennial wants the same thing, success. But if there's not structures to facilitate that success, which we can unpack, they're not hard. If there's not structures in place to facilitate it, I can tell you this workforce is smart enough and wise enough to go, I'm moving on until I find a company that will have structures that will facilitate my success. What we know from the research and implementation experiences, when they find those companies, they don't leave, they stay and they grow and they achieve the growth goals. They become valuable team members, extraordinary team members, I would even argue. But if we're not allowing the employees to keep us accountable, as leadership for those stretches of success, we're not going to be able to keep them in the building. We're going to struggle to keep them in the building.
Yeah. Can you dive a little bit deeper when you talk about structures of success? Like what specifically are they looking for? I know I'm not asking you to give away the whole recipe here, but maybe just a little bit of context would be great.
The recipe is public knowledge because I espouse it all over the place.
Perfect. All right.
Much to the chagrin of my partners. Look, think about this. What the research shows is that 86% of all resources allocated to human resources departments today, 86% is allocated toward recruitment. So we have 86% of those resources that are going to recruit. That's why we have so many companies on the recruiting hamster wheel. Only 4% are allocated toward engagement and only 10% are allocated toward retention. Look, just looking at those numbers, you go, well, no wonder you can't stop recruiting. No wonder you can't get off the recruiting hamster wheel. You're not putting a lot of effort in retention and especially engagement. And I would argue out of that equation of recruiting, which I'm going to call attraction, engagement, and retention, most people say, yeah, we got to retain. I can tell you the critical piece of that is employee engagement. And where we have no employee engagement, we cannot keep them in the building. And so then the question becomes, what structure facilitates that growth of employee engagement? I've narrowed it down to one thing. It's a healthy, thriving, intentional mentorship structure inside the building. Now, it's the most emphatic piece in all the research. 81% of all millennials say that mentoring is essential to here we go again, success. 79% of millennials say that we want success modeled for us. 76% of millennials say we want the core values and the leadership wisdom from the generations before us. But yet what I've also discovered is that the research says that only 23% of all companies have a thriving, effective mentorship structure. Now, I want to put a footnote to that. I believe everything in the research because it's been implemented many times. I can tell you that 23% of leaders who say that they have a thriving, working leadership, that's a lie from the seventh layer of hell because I have yet to find one.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, before starting LEC, John and I were in corporate America, right? Like, so there's a lot of reasons we left, but one of them I was involved with several mentoring programs that I'm not going to take credit for developing. But one of the things that I noticed was like, you're looking at this generation or this group of people and you're saying, we're going to mentor you. And then you're creating a process of mentorship that is rigid and archaic, that doesn't fit their style of learning, their style of communication, their style of collaborate, because they're very collaborative, right? And so they don't want to participate. And then again, the leadership steps back and goes, well, see, this generation they don't want to learn. They really don't want mentorship. And they're like, no, they don't want grandpa sitting down and yelling at them for an hour, telling them all the reasons that they suck. They want to learn from you, to your point. But is that what you're seeing too? Is like, because again, this is a part that I say is unknowing. Like, this is the unknowing part you're killing, right? You think you're doing something good. You said, hey, listen, we know they want mentorship. That's a great idea. And then you build a mentorship program that is not conducive for them to thrive, grow, learn, and be successful in. So they reject it and they move on, or you don't get as much out of it. Do you see that kind of happening in multiple capacities?
Eric, I got to tell you, when I saw this theme developing in the research, I'm one of those that was extraordinarily blessed right out of the gate. My very first client turns out to be the 5th largest financial services company in America. And they're still a client today. And the research has been implemented all through their structure. So when I first saw this mentorship piece developing, we sat down as a team, and what we decided to do is implement the mentorship structure, a mentorship structure throughout the entire state of Florida.
Okay.
A year later, it was the biggest fail of my freaking life. It was a monumental fail. And I was like, how do I recover from this? I don't understand. I mean, how can it be the most emphatic piece in the research and be a failure? I mean, of epic proportions. So what I did is I began to dig down into why it failed. And I discovered a couple things. First of all, the main reason that it failed was not because millennials didn't want to be mentored. The main reason it failed was because mentors were bailing on the process. And so then the question became, why are mentors bailing? Well, I think it's very legitimate why they were bailing. First of all, they weren't hired to be a mentor. That's just kind of a compartmentalized note. But second of all, they were failing because it became too weighty. I mean, what book do I read? What do I have to say? What lesson am I going to teach? And that weight became too much for them, and it began to take up too much time, and they bailed on the process. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. Now, from a millennial side, why did it fail? Well, to your point, what we discovered was that millennials do not define mentorship the same way that I did. I didn't practice what I preached. What I did is I implemented a mentorship structure of how I defined mentorship, not how of the generation that I'm trying to reach that's asking for mentorship. The way they define mentorship, and this is where the success has been. We have almost 10,000 mentors and mentees right now across, I think, in 9 states right now. And this is how they define mentorship. Not the old wise sage speaking into the young buck or doe, to your point, but they see it as a small group, a collaborative process. So what we do is we have small group mentoring that's going, and look, all those mentors, they're not all baby boomers. They're not all Gen Z. We have a lot of millennial mentors, especially older millennial mentors that are absolutely killing it out there. So that small group piece was huge. The second piece, and I would argue this is the biggest piece, is that millennials didn't see success confined to what they were doing in the building, in the company. They see success is whole life. They don't see it as some segmented process. They see success as, am I successful at home? Am I successful with my relationships? Am I successful with my house of worship? Am I successful in my career? Am I successful in education? On and on. Am I successful with my communication skills? I can go on and on. Yeah. And so what we did is we developed a whole life mentorship structure, not one that was just focused on the career track. And so what we've, the conclusion that we've been able to not only verify, but we can speak very hard into that has kind of been this, maybe a little bit of a myth or assumption for many years, is that a happy and whole person at home is a more productive person in the building. And a person that's more productive in the building that is whole and has good clarity and maybe some peace is a much happier person in the home. And so it's a win-win for everybody. And so, the last piece of that is this. So how do we do this whole life mentoring when we've got, I genuinely believe that by the end of next year, the way that the mentorship structure is growing, we'll have over 100,000 mentors and mentees across the country.
Wow.
We actually supply, I personally write the mentorship lessons every single month and send them to the mentors. So the mentors have no weight on what to talk about. It's a 2-page, they have analogy and open-ended questions and maybe some dialogue. They can get the mentorship lesson and they can read it word for word, or they'll get it on the first day of the month, or they can take it and they can put it into their own words. So they're not having to sit around and, come up or derive, some big fancy lesson. And we speak 70% into whole life. The last 30% is focused on the building, and it's asked, and there's one question that every single mentor asks. Like, for an example, a mentorship structure, I'll just call them an HRC. It's a big landscape architecture firm in Atlanta. Every mentor, every month that they meet, asks every mentee the same question at the very end. What can I do to help you succeed inside HRC? And it's the same way across the board. So 70% is focused on whole life. That last 30% is focused on success in the building.
Wow.
And then one more piece. As we've tracked these mentorship structures, this is what we know on the backside, the part that a lot of people aren't talking about. I have companies that are using their mentorship structures to recruit new employees. I have companies that, the data points tell us this, that and I'll use the exact number, their retention levels have increased 63% with their mentorship structure within 3 years of launching the mentorship structures. Wow. Employees know, if employee A gets offered $1 more an hour to go work for a competitor, they also are saying, is there a mentorship structure there? The answer is no. We see employees staying in companies for less pay that have the mentorship structure because they become so reliant on it, and it becomes such a critical piece to their health and their whole life.
Wow. That's impressive. I've got my oldest daughter's a millennial, right? And so I know that she's been doing her internship. You talked to Peyton before the show. She does a lot of stuff for the company. But one of the things that I've heard from her, because I ask her a lot of questions on what she likes and doesn't like, and we have business conversations and personal conversations, but her answers align very heavily with what you're saying, which is, money's important. The company's important, but it's more of a holistic look at life of like, how is this going to enable me to be the person that I want to be, right? And around the clock. So I think that's interesting because I don't know that a lot of companies have look at it that way initially. I think they try to, in saying like, and again, we're going to create, this little program over here or this little thing over here where we're going to go, bang on houses with Habitat for Humanity once a month or once a quarter. And not that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's almost like I look at like incentive programs sometimes. They're like sugar. You try to get a little sugar kick and get a rise out of people temporarily because you're just getting sugar spikes versus giving them something that's holistically better for them, that helps them grow and become stronger, bigger, better, and stronger as a person. Mm-hmm. So I think that's extremely valuable information for somebody that's watching the show to digest, is that, hey, listen, a mentor program, it needs to consist of some components, but it's got to start with first, like, what do they want? How do they learn? How do they want to be mentored? And I think that's extremely powerful. Do you see, like, what's that, kind of just switch gears a little bit. What do you see as like, what have you seen be the biggest like moment of brand slaughter that you've come across with an organization? I'm not asking you to say the name of the company or anything, but like, or maybe it's just a practice, is there one thing that you've seen, like, this is without a doubt the dynamite that blows up in people's face that I've seen consistently?
Is this a rated PG show?
No. It's
no, absolutely not.
And out of respect for you, we've kept our language a little bit cleaner today.
I would say most leaders are saying, a lot of leaders, when it comes to the brand slaughter, I don't give up what those millennials think or say. We're going to move on. And what they're basically saying, and I've had even a couple leaders articulate this to me, we're just gonna, we don't care. We're gonna circumvent them. We're gonna go to the next generation, Gen Z. And I'm like, really? Who do you think's parenting Gen Z? Who do you think's raising Gen Z? You think Gen Z? You think Gen Z? From your perspective, is going to be exponentially better? Yeah. From your perspective, no, that's just a lie from hell. Yeah. That's just not the case at all.
That mindset tells me they need to bank on robots. I would put more faith in robots if I had that mindset to say, like, I need something I can personally program to be just like me. And that's where I'm putting all my money if I'm not willing to look at generational differences and be open-minded.
And then proceed to drive your business off the cliff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, think about this. This is a fairly well-documented case study that came out last year. If you go into any city in America that has a McDonald's, can I say that? Yeah, we'll say it. That has a McDonald's, a Starbucks, and a Taco Bell, and a Chick-fil-A. Those four things, those four restaurants. You go into any city that has all four of those. You take the revenue from Taco Bell, from Starbucks, and McDonald's, you combine it, and you multiply it by 2, you get the revenue for one Chick-fil-A. Now, so then the question becomes, what and why?
That chicken is so damn good.
Well, here it is. The Cathy family they still speak it today. We're not in the chicken business. Think about that. Yeah, we're in the people business.
Yep.
All those other companies, they're in the revenue business. They're in the burger business. They're in the coffee business. They're in what else? They will try to monetize, to your guys' point, they will monetize robots or whatever. Chick-fil-A is just going to continue to kill it because they're in the people business and they provide structures of success for their people. And when we focus on our people, we're going to succeed. We're going to succeed.
Fantastic. Well, John, do you have anything else while we're sitting? We had a couple minutes left on the show.
No, this has been great. Kind of validates the thoughts that I had in my mind coming into this. So
I almost feel like we should bottle this up and charge for this episode because there's so much good content that it can't be given away for free. But Dr. Kent, it's as usual, it's a pleasure speaking with you. I mean, you're doing amazing work as a friend and resource for us. Like I look forward to every conversation and post you put out there because I just think you're evangelizing a message that's so important right now for companies. If they just open their ears to listen a little bit, they could not only save their organization, but really help them just become the next big thing in their industry. And so if people out there are listening to this and they're trying to get in touch with you and they love what they're hearing and they want to learn more or inquire with you about your services, what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
The best way is just to go to getstarted@retentionpartners.com. Getstarted@retentionpartners.com. If you don't want to do that, go to my LinkedIn profile, send me a message. I promise you, I'll message you back. There's a lot of information there as well about who I am, about the research project, about the implementation experiences, all of those kind of things that I believe that would be beneficial in helping you make some kind of decision. One of the things I even have, here I'll default to my baby boomer perspective, but I have a little bit of a process when I help companies. And one of the processes that I have is step number 1 is speaking directly to the decision makers, the leadership in the companies. Because at the beginning, a lot of leaders wanted me to go to client-facing employees and help them develop strategies to effectively attract, engage, and retain. And also, the piece that we didn't talk about that very few people are talking about is how do we attract that millennial client? I'll come back on another time and we'll talk specifically about millennial clients, by the way. That's a whole subject matter right there.
There's the teaser for episode 2.
Yeah. And as I go in and as I went in and did that without buying from the leadership, it wasn't sustainable. So I go in, I talk to the leadership. Then we do strategy development. Then we implement that structure, that mentorship structure. Then we activate the idea, revenue generating voice of that generation, which is the key to retention. Those 3 pieces. And what they require is this. I'm not a cheerleader. I'm not the guy that's going to come in and when I leave, you're going to go, man, we're going to conquer the world. I'm not that guy. Who I am and who we are as retention partners is we're going to form a relationship with you. And that relationship we're going to form with you, we're going to take you on a journey to help you achieve your growth goals and overcome these impediments that keep you or threaten those growth goals. But if you don't want a relationship, you probably got the wrong guy. But I would also look, I'm a world-class smack talker. I can tell you. And this is what I want to tell you. If you don't want to go on that journey with me, with us, you go find somebody else. And if you go find somebody else, what's going to happen is you're going to run into a dead end, and you're going to come back, and it's going to cost you more when you come back. And I can tell you that has happened over and over and over again. So I'm not saying that I'm the end all be all, but I am saying that the implementation experiences and the research, they're unrivaled with any implementation and research in the world today. I mean, that's what leaders tell me every single day. And so my mission is I want to help leaders achieve their growth goals by solving this impediment called their workforce crisis. And that requires me to develop a relationship with you.
Gotcha. Very good stuff. Well, our listeners hopefully will take ear to that. And if they have questions, as he said, reach out to him. He's glad to talk to anybody via LinkedIn or his website. You can fill out a form. Dr. K, thank you for being on the show today. We appreciate it as always. And I'm going to hold you to it. We're going to have another episode at some point in time where you can come back and share a little more about what you're doing out there with the recruiting and attraction piece. So,
and the millennial clients. And millennial clients. Yeah, big deal.
Yeah. So a lot more. Maybe it's a 3-episode deal. Maybe it's a trilogy that we do with him. But appreciate you being on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and we hope everybody's enjoyed this episode of Preventing Brand Slaughter.
Thank you. I'm honored.
That's all for this episode of Preventing Brand Slaughter. We do wish you limitless business success as you perfect new ways of protecting your brand through stellar employee retention, killer customer experience, and unprecedented sales and marketing. Get more valuable advice on brand slaughter prevention that helps you avoid messing up your brand by listening to more exciting discussions at lec4u.com. That's LEC4YOU.com. Never miss another episode, and be sure to get your business-savvy friends to listen as well. We hope to see you on the next one. Thank you for listening.